Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Africa News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, on the eve of Algeria's long-anticipated presidential election, there's not much doubt the vote will return President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to power and a fourth term. Despite his ailing health and calls for change, many Algerians, haunted by memories of the Islamist war of the 90s, hope more of the same will mean stability. We'll be hearing from our correspondent on the ground. Also, gone but not forgotten, a decade on from the disappearance of French-Canadian journalist Guy-André Kieffer, the search for him continues. He went missing from Abidjan whilst investigating corruption in the vast cocoa sector. Our own authorities have been accused of not doing enough to find out what happened. And we're joined by one of the directors of the Virunga Foundation after the chief warden of Africa's oldest national park is shot 4 times near Goma. Manuel de Mero may have been targeted for his vigorous defence of Virunga Park's interests. First up, though, Algerians head to the polls on Thursday for a presidential election that will be closely watched. Despite his failing health and 15 years already in power, Abdelaziz Bouteflika is expected to return for a fourth term. But the campaign has been dogged by accusations that he's rigged the vote. And our correspondents say many voters they've spoken to are torn between frustration and fear that change could mean instability. Catherine Norris-Trent, Karim Hakiki and Adele Gastel sent us this report.
Nothing to do, as usual. Every day, Samir and his friends hang aimlessly around this neighbourhood of Algiers, getting together to smoke cigarettes and play video games. 2/3 of Algeria's population are aged under 30, many of them unemployed. Like Samir. He tells us he won't be going to vote.
The election isn't anything to do with us. I'm not going to legitimise their mistakes. I'm not calling for people to abstain from voting. Everyone should do as he likes. That's not my responsibility. But I don't trust politicians. They don't keep their promises.
A younger generation with little hope for the political future. Samir and his friends dream of leaving Algeria. For others who remember the country's long civil war, the priority during the election is avoiding any upheaval.
The only politics I care about is having enough to eat, drink, a roof over my head, and a bit of fun. The rest doesn't interest me.
Our biggest concern in the country today is living in peace. That's all we want, peace.
Algerians have followed this election campaign closely and love talking about politics. But a big question is, how many of them will bother turning out to vote and expressing their hopes for the future via the ballot box?
Well, Catherine Norris-Trent, who we saw at the end of that report, is following the election for us. She tells us that despite the feelings of disillusion, calls for change from Bouteflika's main rival, Ali Ben Fliss, have gained some traction.
Well, he's certainly making waves. Ali Ben Fliss, a former right-hand man of President Bouteflika, has very squarely turned against the president and the ruling party now. And he's been very vocal in the last stages, in the run-up to this election. He's been saying that electoral fraud is his principal adversary, and I mean, saying that in no uncertain terms on television and rallies. And that has been sticking. It's getting a lot of attention in the press. He's also managed to gather support from different bases around Algeria, people turning up to show support. He's voiced concerns over vote rigging. Previous polls here in Algeria have also been marred by accusations of electoral fraud. We shouldn't forget there is popular support still for the ageing President Bouteflika, even though he's very ill. People see him as someone who brought peace after the civil war, and really they're afraid of falling back.
Catherine Norris-Trent there for us in Algiers. Now, in other news, for the 4th time in just 3 days, suspected Islamic militants have launched a fatal attack in Nigeria. At least 20 people were killed in the northeast Wednesday. Gunmen opened fire in the village of Wala in Gwoza district. Just last week, a local leader had appealed to the government to do more to stop the daily violence from suspected Boko Haram extremists. Now, the latest bloodshed comes after over 70 people were killed on Monday in a bus station bombing in Abuja, and yesterday's abduction of over 100 young women taking finals at a school in Borno State. And the government's still searching for the missing girls and has offered a reward of almost €220,000 for information leading to their discovery. The final soldier in Chad's peacekeeping force in Central African Republic has left. It decided to pull out more than 800 troops after they were accused of having attacked Central African civilians in a market last month. Now, the Chadian contingent had played a key part in the African peacekeeping force that's struggling to rein in escalating violence in Central African Republic. France had asked Chad to change its mind, but N'Djamena decided it had had enough after its troops faced repeated accusations of siding with Muslims in the country's conflict. Thousands of people have been killed in the wake of violence sparked by a short-lived rebel takeover last year. A member of the Belgian royal family who serves as the chief warden of Africa's oldest national park has been hospitalised after having been shot and seriously wounded in Democratic Republic of Congo. Emmanuel de Merode runs Virunga National Park and is in serious but stable condition in Goma after having been attacked as he travelled alone in his jeep not far from the northern city on Tuesday. Now, a team is standing by ready to airlift him to Nairobi for further treatment. De Merode is one of several officials who fought fiercely to protect the park from the threat of poachers, local militia and even oil exploration. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more.
It's the biggest national park in Africa, 2 million acres of forest, mountains and even a volcano. Managing such a site is a mammoth task. State funds from the Democratic Republic of Congo are not enough to cover costs. Park director Emmanuel de Merode was in charge of administering funds from a not-for-profit foundation to make up for the shortfall. The Virunga National Park was established in 1925, while the DRC was under Belgian colonial rule. A protected environment where today some of the world's endangered mountain gorillas can still be found. The UNESCO heritage site has suffered since the country's civil war in 1997, falling prey to illegal poachers and deforestation carried out by local communities. Activists are worried about a plan for oil exploration in the park, initiated by British firm SOCO International. Security in Virunga has long been a serious concern. This sweeping expanse of land has only 400 rangers. Authorities plan to add an extra 100 security staff to that number. In the last 15 years, some 130 of the park's guards have been killed in skirmishes with poachers or other armed groups. The Kivu province has been plagued by conflict for more than 2 decades and is home to a number of rival armed factions.
François-Xavier de Donny is a Belgian MP and a director of the Virunga Foundation. He told us earlier that de Merode was fearless in doing his job.
He put obstacles on the road of many people. First of all, he made it difficult for potential oil exploiters to do their job because he pleaded the legality, and the legality today forbids any exploration or exploitation within the park. Of course, Parliament may change the law, but they haven't done it yet. Second, he was also fighting against the illegal charcoal producers, and charcoal sales are the biggest source of revenue of the FDLR, the former Hutu rebels. Thousands of them are still in the park, or around the park mostly, but also some of them in the park. Third, he also fought the Mai illegal fishing activities in Lake Edward. And lastly, last week, a group of people settled on an island which belongs to the park, but which was no private land, were expelled. And of course, they had bought this land illegally from local politicians who had no property rights on the land. So we have here at least 4 tracks to be explored by the judicial system.
So you're pretty confident that he was targeted?
Oh, he was surely targeted. He was attacked on a road where during daytime practically never attacks occur. And the attacker stole nothing, not even his cellular phone, not even his iPhone, nothing. They shot at him and they disappeared in the jungle.
Now, bearing in mind what you've just said about the conditions under which de Merode worked, he must have been aware that he could potentially be a target.
I told it very, very often to him, and he was aware of that. But sometimes you just take risks which you maybe should not have taken. But he was aware that he could be a target, and some of his personnel was targeted in the past. They were not killed, but they were illegally arrested because they had put obstacles on the road of Soko, for instance.
And it sounds like he had quite a lot of... he had official powers as well. It's not just that he was a warden dealing with the wildlife and the...
He's a civil servant of Congo. He has managerial powers as head of the park, but he has also judicial powers.
François-Xavier de Donier there speaking to us a little earlier on. And before moving on in news just in, we're hearing that Guinea-Bissau is to hold a presidential election runoff vote after no candidate secured a majority in Sunday's first round poll. We will be keeping an eye on that and bringing you more news over the week, so stay with us. But first, 10 years ago, French-Canadian journalist Guy-André Kiefer disappeared in Abidjan. He'd, at the time, been investigating corruption in the vast Ivorian cocoa industry, and his colleagues feared that he may have made enemies on the way and been abducted as a result. The country's authorities have been slammed by activists for not doing enough to investigate. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
A dozen posters of Guy-André Kiefer have been put up in Abidjan. They've been funded by Reporters Without Borders and will stay there for 2 weeks. On them, a quote reads, "No one will be protected," a statement made by President Alassane Ouattara. Yet, according to the NGO, the investigation has made no progress since Ouattara came to power in 2011.
The arrival of the new government in Ivory Coast did not solve the problem, despite the fact that the main suspects were close to the former rulers, including Michel Legré, who is the brother-in-law of the former First Lady. He has not been troubled by the new government.
Guy-André Kiefer was last seen 10 years ago on a car park in Abidjan, where he was due to meet Simone Bagbo's brother-in-law. At the time, he was reporting on the corruption in Ivory Coast's cocoa industry. In 2009, Simone Bagbo was interrogated by a French judge. But so far, no one has been charged. Simone Bagbo has been detained ever since her husband Laurent Gbagbo was arrested in April 2011 during the post-electoral crisis, which left 3,000 people dead. On Wednesday, representatives of the press said Kiefer was not the only journalist who'd been targeted. They said several have been killed these last 10 years. The latest one was Désiré Nyonsiowe, who was shot in his home in Abidjan last November.
That's it from me for this hour. Stay with us. More news and headlines coming up. Take care.